Welcome to the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network, the podcast 10 for 10, which brings you the week's top 10 compliance stories curated together in one podcast each week. Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, brings you the compliance professional stories you need to be aware of at the end of your busy week. Sit back and in 10 minutes, hear about the stories every compliance professional should be aware of. Every Saturday, 10 for 10 highlights the most important news, insights, and analysis for the compliance professional, all curated by the voice of compliance, Tom Fox. Get your weekly filling of compliance stories with 10 for 10. Hosted by Tom Fox. 10 for 10 is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. First, a word from the sponsor of the Compliance Podcast Network for this month, Ethico.
In the intricate world of ethics and compliance, each second is precious, and slow case closures are more than just delays, they're missed opportunities. Enter Ethico. Our solution revolutionizes case management, cutting closure times in half and turning every challenge into a chance for improvement. Imagine a workspace where efficiency and compliance coexist harmoniously. Don't just dream of faster resolutions, make it your reality. Visit ethico.com/CPN today to book a demo and dive into our exclusive white paper by Tom Fox, the ROI of compliance, and to try our free ROI calculator. Empower your team with the tools they deserve.
10 for 10 for the week ending May 4, 2024. May the 4th be with you. Our first story comes to us from the New York Times, first of a couple of stories from the Times. And the Federal Trade Commission has cleared the merger of Pioneer Natural Resources and Exxon, actually the acquisition of Pioneer by Exxon, as the CEO of, as long as the CEO of Pioneer does not move on to the Exxon board. Scott Sheffield has been accused of colluding with OPEC and others to not only gain control of global oil production and prices, but really set prices in an illegal cartel. The deputy director of the FTC said Mr. Sheffield's past conduct makes it crystal clear he should not be anywhere near Exxon's boardroom, and now he won't be. Our next story from the New York Times reports that the U.S. has imposed sanctions on Chinese companies for aiding Russia's war effort. The Biden administration announced this week that nearly 300 new sanctions on international suppliers of military equipment and technology that the administration says have been helping Russia restock its arsenal in its war against Ukraine. The sanction represents a broadening U.S. effort to disrupt Russia's industrial supply chain, military industrial supply chain. The targets include a dozen companies based in China, which the U.S. says have been increasing their efforts to resupply Russia. McKinsey's been in the news the last couple of weeks, and this week Reuters reports that a former McKinsey & Company partner sued the global consulting firm and accused it of defaming him and making him a scapegoat to distract attention from McKinsey's work advising OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma and other manufacturers of opioid pain meds. The partner, who was fired in 2021 after the DOJ began conducting a criminal investigation. Part of that investigation concerned whether McKinsey obstructed justice, an inquiry related to McKinsey's disclosure that it had fired two partners who communicated about deleting documents relating to their opioid work. The South China Morning Post has reported that ByteDance, the parent of TikTok, has indicated or disclosed 61 internal misconduct cases involving employees who were fired or charged with accepting bribes, leaking data, or claiming expenses inappropriately. It's not identified how many of these were TikTok employees, but obviously this will be of concern to U.S. regulators. Next up, from the Wall Street Journal, Risk and Compliance Journal, Mingy Sun reports that the Commodities Futures Trading Commission has named its first chief artificial intelligence officer, responding to the Biden administration's push to govern the use of AI across governmental entities. Next up, a second story from the Wall Street Journal. This one from Finance and Currencies reports that the founder of Binance, the world's largest crypto firm, Changpeng Zhao, or CZ as he is known, was sentenced to 4 months in prison, a much lighter sentence requested by prosecutors who had hoped to send a message about crime in the crypto industry. Zhao had pled guilty in November and agreed to step down as Binance's chief executive, although he remains the majority shareholder. Next up, the first of two stories from the Financial Times. The first one from about the chief executive officer of Ericsson said that regulation was driving Europe to irrelevance. Why is this significant, and why does it fit into compliance? Well, these are the guys that had a $1 billion FCPA fine and then had their DPA extended because their conduct was so bad under that DPA. So pretty clearly, he needs regulation. Ericsson needs regulation, and to claim that regulation is killing business after you got out of the DPA, well, what do you expect? Our second story from the Financial Times reports that internal probes internal investigations are being spotlighted as perhaps whitewashes. Nigel Farage, of all people, has labeled a law firm's report and claims that he was debanked by Coutts, the bank, as a whitewash. Corporate probes have been thrust into the spotlight after a recent slew of high-profile cases of alleged misconduct or companies' failings raised questions about the quality and independence of the lawyer investigations and how companies use those to rebut criticism. This is not new, but it's certainly something that warrants exploration and investigation, and how companies use these to exonerate themselves and how they use them with regulators. From the U.S. Supreme Court, it will not hear Elon Musk's dispute over his SEC settlement. The Supreme Court this week declined to hear Elon Musk's bid to throw out part of a securities fraud settlement over his agreement from his 2018 tweet that he would be taking Tesla private, and he had, quote, funding secured, in the quote. Obviously, this was not true. It was never true. And he paid a relatively small fine, $20 million, and he gave up his role as the company's chairman. He also agreed to let a Tesla lawyer pre-approve some posts he made on social media. He sought to terminate this pre-approval mandate, calling it a government-imposed muzzle. Well, he agreed to it, and the judge approved it, and now he wants to get out of it. He's clearly proven he's not, he's not somebody that you want to have just out there. Our next story comes to us from Deccan Herald, and it reports that a sessions court in Pune, India, has directed the Anti-Corruption Bureau to investigate allegations against Cognizant Technologies that it paid a bribe through a contractor to local government officials to secure necessary permits and environmental clearances for a campus it was building on the outskirts of the city. Why is this news? Well, that's a really interesting question because this information has been in the public arena for at least 5 years. And for India now to begin an investigation of this does seem quite odd, and probably has political ramifications for the Indian government. You always want corruption investigated, but you have to wonder why, after 5 years having received a declination, Cognizant Technologies would receive something like this, or an investigation would open. But it's India. As I mentioned at the start of this podcast, this month's sponsor for the entire Compliance Podcast Network is Ethico. Have you ever wondered how to show the ROI of your compliance program? Have you struggled with the budgeting process, getting the funds you want for your compliance program? Well, I've partnered with Ethico to put together a white paper on the ROI of compliance, which shows you not only how to demonstrate ROI, but also how to speak finance when you're sitting across from the CFO with your budget proposals. Check out the website and get the white paper. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of 10 for 10. I hope you'll check out the newest podcast in the Compliance Podcast Network, the Compliance Tip of the Day. In Compliance Tip of the Day, I give a 5 to 8 minute summary of one tip that you can integrate into your compliance program or put together for greater compliance program efficiency.